How I quit after I got fired and unfired. In my last post, I shared the story of how I got fired in a huff by someone who, to put it diplomatically, overestimated his own authority, only for my termination to be rescinded by his manager a few hours later when she found out about it. This one is the follow-up, set a year later, and is the story of how I finally ended up quitting that job. Cast of characters: me. I was a lead sysadmin at a very large telco, responsible for the email system at the corporate HQ. I was a contractor there, which will become relevant to the story later. Jim, J in my last story, an IT architect at a large telco. Jim was my primary customer contact until he flew off the handle and tried to fire me under circumstances that were dubious at best. Jim was a pretty smart technical guy who was also a bull in a china shop who shouldn't have been allowed to work around other people. Lynn, not in the previous story, Lynn is the IT architect who I was assigned to work with after Jim screwed the pooch in my previous story. She was awesome, for reasons that will become clear soon. She reported to Jim, and utterly loathed him. Marie, M in the previous story, Jim's boss, the IT department manager. She unfucked everything after Jim fired me. In early 2000, I got a phone call at home from an IT recruiter. This wasn't uncommon at all. I had at one point or another interacted with half the sleazy recruitment agencies in my city. This call was a little bit different. It was from an in-house recruiter for a tech company, a company that was one of the shining stars of tech where I lived, with a reputation for not only having solid technology in their market, but also being a great place to work. They were an honest-to-goodness unicorn, back before anyone called them that. The conversation went something like this: Recruiter: Hi Blemklorf, this is Recruiter with Cool Tech Company, how are you today? Me: Doing well, thanks, what can I do for you? Recruiter: Blemklorf, I'm calling because Lynn gave me a copy of your resume, and suggested that I reach out to you about a position we have open. A bog-standard HR introductory call followed, where I found out that they were looking for a lead Windows sysadmin for their internal IT department. Now this confused the shit out of me, because Lynn was my lead, albeit through a dotted line. Let that sink in. My boss sent my resume to a recruiter without my knowledge or permission. Obviously, this was something that warranted further investigation. So, I called Lynn. Apparently, she had just interviewed at Cool Tech Company, and didn't get the job. On the "thanks but no thanks" call from HR, she told the recruiter something to the effect of, "Well, that's too bad, but I know someone else you need to talk to. Blemklorf is better at this stuff than me, and I think he'd love working at Cool Tech Company." And then she sent over my resume, which she had from when she referred me for an internal hire job in another division of the telco we both worked at. When I asked her why she did that, she just said, "You have to trust me on this one. I can't say more." So I had a phone interview with the hiring manager at Cool Tech Company. And he and I meshed well, and he decided to bring me in for the full gauntlet interview with the rest of the sysadmin team there. Around this time, I got a meeting request from Jim, who I hadn't really interacted with a lot since the time he tried, and failed, to shitcan me. At the meeting, Jim informed me that Telco had decided to insource all the contract sysadmins, and bring them on as direct Telco employees. He had an offer letter waiting for me at the meeting. I opened the offer letter, only to discover that it was a 20% pay cut from what I was earning as a contractor, to do the same job. There was a slight bump in terms of benefits value. From what I recall, the 401k match was superior, but at first glance, it was obvious that this was a pay hit no matter how you added it up. Jim also informed me that this wasn't optional, that the insourcing was going to happen whether I liked it or not, and that this was a take it or leave it offer. Not only would this be a pay cut, but I would also be reporting directly to Jim, as would all the other newly insourced sysadmins on the team. Either one of those would be deal breakers, but I kept my mouth shut, knowing his history. I caught up with Lynn a few minutes later. She took one look at my face and knew what had just happened. "This is why I told you to trust me," she said, before I even said a word. I could have kissed her. So, a couple of weeks later I went in for the full interview at Cool Tech Company, which resulted in an offer that would have been a no-brainer to accept even if I hadn't just had my pay cut. I received that offer just before the planned effective date of the insourcing, and pay hit. The next day, I walked into Lynn's cube and let her know that I'd gotten the job. She got this look of utter delight on her face, and said to me, "You have to let me be there when you tell Jim." So, we walked over to his office together, and told him. He looked absolutely floored, and as usually did when he didn't get his way, immediately went into argument mode. All the other sysadmins took the job. True, but 2 others quit within the first 2 months because they didn't have the head start on their job search that I did. You're making a big mistake, and why would that be? Do you think that little company is going to last? They did. The problem was that because of the planned insourcing, there was no mechanism to continue to pay me past the end of that week, as Telco's contract with the outsourcer was expiring. Enter Marie. Marie was Jim's boss, who I had a great relationship with. Now, I felt genuinely bad about this, because IT operations at corporate HQ was her responsibility, and this left her with not only no email server support, but only a day to figure out how to ensure continuity. My backup had quit for unrelated reasons a month before. I was perfectly willing to give 2 weeks' notice per custom, mind you, they just didn't have a straightforward way to pay me for it. So, Marie called me into her office, after Jim had left for the day. I told her that I was already in the interview process at the time Jim gave me the offer. This was true, although I left out the whole part about Lynn, and the fact that it was such a big pay cut made it a no-brainer to continue the process. Marie had an utterly stunned look on her face, and she said to me, "Pay cut? You all were supposed to be kept at parity." What I found out later, through my mole Lynn, was that Jim neglected to relay that instruction to company HR when they were preparing the offer letters. They prepared the offers at what HR deemed to be market rate, which in this case was a substantial pay hit. I never found out if he did that on purpose, but given that he'd complained in the past that he thought we were overpaid for what we did, I'd be willing to hazard a guess that he did. Anyway, even though Marie upped the offer to match my current pay rate, so much for take it or leave it, and promised that I'd be reporting to her given my past history with Jim, I still declined as my new job had a lot more long-term opportunity. I ended up taking the job at the telco, just long enough to work out my notice period. HR was very confused at my exit interview when they noticed that I'd been with the company for only 9 working days. Incidentally, I ended up staying at Cool Tech Company for over 8 years. It was the best career move I ever made. My only regret about it was that I was never able to get Lynn a job there. On the other hand, Marie stepped in and took away all of Jim's supervisory responsibility over the sysadmins, sticking him in a strict technical role. He lasted a few months after that and bailed out to a much smaller company.